Hi, everyone. I'm Morgan, LA-based contemporary Pilates instructor.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sébastien Lagree. I'm the creator and founder of Lagree Fitness.
And we're excited to talk to you today about Lagree versus Pilates.
Exactly. Well, Lagree and Pilates, right? Not versus, because for me, I consider Pilates and Lagree the yin and the yang.
Totally.
You know what I mean? So, like they both are rooted in low impact, and right now it's interesting because I'm seeing that there's definitely an increase, there's more awareness for the need for low impact training. And I think that this is the third consecutive years now where more Americans are actually looking for low impact alternatives. I think like 32 or 35 or 37% of all Americans are looking for low impact alternative. And what I like to explain to people, and what I love about your posts and your platform, is that you're the first person who's really explaining it very well, the difference without Pilates and Lagree, without putting any of the method down, because when I talk about my videos, when I talk about Pilates, I want people to know that I have the most amount of respect for Joseph Pilates, right? And I've never looked at these two methods competing each other. I've always looked at Pilates and Lagree as complementing each other. And I always, in videos, and also, the last video I did about the chef, I tell people I do Pilates on the Megaformer. There's some wonderful exercise that I do on the Mega, but they are Pilates exercise, right? So this, I think this conversation is needed. I think that we need a conversation like this every month, because you can do, you can't, it's not because you're like on certain machine that you do that type of workout. And I think people need to understand that you can use the reformer multiple ways. You can use the Megaformer multiple ways, right? So it's not the machine so much, it's really how you use the machine and how you do the exercise, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And something that I talk to people a lot about is finding the right movement for you. There's space for everything and everyone. It's just figuring out what the best movement is for you and your body, and depending on what your goals are. And I have a unique perspective because I've taught both Lagree and Pilates now. So I have a little of both. And that's why I started the series talking to more people about the differences between. Versus is a harsh language, but the differences between the two that you should know before you walk into the room to know which is the best fit for you, so you can decide before you start the workout, kind of thing. So.
And also what I like in your post, you also talk about the other studios in between.
Yes.
Because what I think people don't understand is I license my method, right? So you have to pay to use the name. And the license is only $4,000 a year. So it's not like it's like, an arm and a leg, right? But we have some licensees, right? Will send me a nice letter, say, Sebastian, I want to move a different direction. So I'm going to stop paying for the license. I'm going a different direction. All they're doing is essentially buying, a copycat machine, right? And they are doing this kind of workout, but they can't call it Lagree anymore. So they call it Pilates.
Mm-hmm.
And I love the videos that you're doing, because you really explain, like, listen, there's now two types of Pilates, where there's like the real Pilates, and then there's like all the other studios that kind of want to do Lagree, but can't call it that way.
Yeah.
And that's why it's very confusing for all the consumers out there, because some people really want to do Pilates or want to Lagree, and they're just confused because that is this, this workout is Lagree, but it's called Pilates, and people are going to, you can see the circuit,
It's so confusing. And
yes.
I like to, maybe it's helpful we level set. I actually think there's even more. So there's like contemporary Pilates, there's classical Pilates, which is like the OG Pilates, then there's Lagree, and then we have that other bucket that tends to cause a lot of the confusion, because they can't call themselves Lagree, obviously, but they are more similar to Lagree than they are Pilates.
Of course.
And Pilates is not a trademark term, so they can use that term very easily. So that's where the confusion, it's like those four categories. And there's place for all of them. There's different types of movement for different type of people and their preferences. We obviously have our preferences, but I think it's important to understand the spectrum of different types of movement that are all on a machine that is spring-based, but that doesn't necessarily, yes, it's spring-based, yes, we work on our core, but that doesn't necessarily mean they are apples to apples. There are differences, there are pros and cons of all.
Correct, absolutely. And when I was talking about the Lagree and Pilates being basically the two side of the same coin, it's really because of the spring base. That the spring is the nucleus. It's the ancestral link, to the reformer. Because when I got on the reformer back in 1998, I just loved it right away.
Yeah,
I saw a potential, because right away, that first session that I did with my Pilates instructor, I asked him right away, how come there's no platform on the front? How come you don't have a platform on the back? How come you can't do any exercise on the back? And he's looking at me, he's just like, why would you want to do anything on the back of the machine, right? But I just saw this potential, because the spring, the use of the spring, you guys understand, it's just like, you have to use springs. On my website, we have the springs on different machines, but also sell the springs individually that you can attach anywhere, because to me, it's like the best source of tension. Fuck the rubber bands, okay? Fuck the bungees. It's all about the spring, because the spring gives you an incredible range. So like a foot-long spring can basically stretch about 3 feet in length, right? But if you take a foot-long bungee, it would only stretch 1.5, okay? Mm-hmm. And then after that, if you try to stretch the bungee beyond its range, then it'll snap, okay? But the spring doesn't do that. The spring is like the child between a rubber band and a dumbbell. It's absolutely fantastic.
Yeah.
You know, and I've added the spring on a lot of the equipment. I mean, obviously here, this is like my playground over here, and I'm obsessed with the springs, because the spring really allows you to work on the muscles without adding any excessive stress on the joints. It helps with lowering the inflammation, also eliminating the inflammation that exercise can cause. But the springs, most of all, allow you to keep control over the movement. And I think that's why, you know, Joseph called it contrology, because having control of the movement, it's very important.
Yeah. And maybe this is a good segue to talk about some of the differences between a megaformer and a traditional reformer, and how they're used a little bit differently. So typically with a traditional reformer, you're going to have something like a foot bar at the bottom. So versus these handlebars, still spring-based, you still have a carriage of sorts, but as Sebastian mentioned, there is usually no platforms this wide. So typically it's a much thinner platform. What other things? We have some straps that are usually used for your feet, which I know is not common for Lagree either. What are the other pieces of a reformer? But there's also other apparatuses, which I think is very different for Pilates as well. So in addition to reformers, you have something called the Cadillac, you have barrels, you have, what else am I missing? The chair. So there's some other machines that are also spring-based that—
The chair is wonderful.
Yeah, I love the chair. In classical Pilates, you'll see more use of those apparatuses. In contemporary, it's usually just typically chair and reformer, but that's kind of some of the big differences. One of the first pieces I usually try to educate people on, with whether they're trying to figure out what class they're signing up for, is just look at the equipment. It's pretty apparent. Lagree equipment is very easily identifiable.
Usually when you see two platforms on both ends, it's either a megaformer or it's a copy of the megaformer.
Yeah,
you know,
or the split handlebars.
Yes.
Usually the single horizontal foot bars, and something you would see commonly in Lagree, or knockoff. I don't know the best
knockoff. You can say knockoff, copycats. You know, I debriefed, you know, Morgan on who I can say is a copycat and who I can say. Usually, when a licensee says, "Hey, we go off on a different direction," they're going to buy, you know, other machines that are not Lagree machines. Sometimes they call it megaformer. You know, it's interesting because I charge a license to use the word Lagree megaformer, and people, they don't want to pay for the license, but they're all using these names, you know. So I'm sending literally cease and desist on a weekly basis, right? It's very annoying, guys, okay? If you don't have the megaformer, don't fucking say you have the megaformer, because you don't have the megaformer, okay? So.
Another thing I like, if you're trying to identify whether it's a Lagree class or not, you'll always hear a Lagree class, call it a megaformer. Personal opinion, never feels the same, but it is something that is more closer to Lagree than it is to traditional Pilates.
Yeah, you know, so what you guys have to understand is that when I saw the reformer, I love that moving carriage. I love the springs. And at the time I was bodybuilding, and I used to have this ab wheel in my gym bag all the time. And I would wrap a TheraBand around the ab wheel, and I would just basically just like use the ab wheel in counter resistance against the bungee. So when I saw the reformer for the first time, I'm like, wow, I actually can do the same exercise on the front of the reformer with the assistance of the spring, but I could go on the back and then do the exact same exercise against the spring. So these were ideas like right away I got, and it's why you don't see any shoulder rest on my machines, because you want to use the entire surface of the carriage, either for the front or for the back, or even sideways, right? So the idea was to basically do all these fitness exercises you would do at the gym, like the plank, you know, the push-up, lunges, squats, all of that stuff, but with the added challenge of the springs, because the springs on the front of the machine can support you against gravity, so you can actually keep a better body alignment and keep control over that body alignment over a long period of time, because Lagree is all about time and attention. Or you could do the same exercise on the back of the machine against the tension, and that would intensify the exercise, you know, tremendously. And that's really the whole premise of the workout is you do this exercise you find at the gym. Pilates has a lot of exercise from the ballet world, right? So there's also a lot of ballet terminology, because early on, you know, the clientele of Joseph Pilates when opening studios back in the late 1920s were dancers. So the original Pilates protocol is heavily influenced by a ballet jargon. And when people take my classes, I don't want to say plie first position, plie second position, because none of you are dancers, okay? And by the way, I'm going to let you in a secret, okay? If you want the body of a dancer, you got to dance.
You just made me think of something else that I wanted to talk about. Oh, origin story. Another good point about how it was also a rehabilitation method. And I think some of that comes through a lot versus Lagree, more about fitness, getting your heart rate up, challenging yourself with bodybuilding principles. The origin story for Pilates is more about rehabilitation. It dates back to World War I soldiers that were rehabbing from war. Joseph Pilates saw an opportunity as they were bedridden, saw some springs, pulled the springs off, and helped them build strength back through those springs. And I think that's an important thing to know about too, because for Pilates, you see a lot of clients who are coming back from like knee replacement surgery or rotator cuff surgery. So we spend a lot of time lying down sometimes. And I know that's something that's very different than Lagree. So I think that's a big, important differentiation between the origin stories as well. One more centered around fitness and one started more in the physical therapy.
Well, yes, and that's kind of what you and I were talking about just before we started to tape this, right? Is I did a documentary on fitness because I'm very interested in fitness. And so what I discovered in doing this documentary is the word fitness is a word that was created back in the 70s to package essentially bodybuilding, right? And then you could see it because when I moved to this country in the 90s, every single time that I picked up a fitness magazine, there was always a male bodybuilder with either a bikini model or a female bodybuilder. There was never yoga people or Pilates people. Matter of fact, I read all the publication, right? Men's Fitness, Muscle and Fitness, Iron, Flex. I was like subscribing to all this publication on a monthly basis. Never in those magazines there were things about yoga, Pilates, anything like this. It was always centered around bodybuilding. So we have to imagine yourself when Joseph opened his first studio in 1926, 1927 in New York. If you Google fitness, Wikipedia say that the first fitness studio that ever opened with Jack LaLanne back in 1936 in Palo Alto, California. This is officially the first gym. But Joseph Pilates kind of beat, Jack LaLanne by 10 years, because he described his place as a gym, right? So there's a lot of jargon, there's a lot of vocabulary that simply was not in existence during Joseph's time. Now, it doesn't mean that he didn't apply some of this concept, but he never talked about it because there was no word. So time and attention, muscle fatigue, pumping the muscle, right? Getting a pump, you don't have that. Probably they had word for soreness and shaking and things like that, but there was not really an established protocol for fitness. And also you have to understand that people today, they want to look great for the red carpet, for covers. There's none of that stuff in the 1920s, right? There's no like men's of the year and the sexiest body and then the sexy abs and this is the sexy butt. There's none of that stuff exists. So there's not really a need for that. So fitness has evolved tremendously since Joseph's times, okay? And poor Joseph, he kind of just like started this whole movement and he never really was never really successful with his studios, right? Yeah, he was always kind of pigeonholed in his kind of obscured type of training. He became very popular among the dancing community. Martha Graham was basically probably the one who actually sustained Pilates because otherwise Pilates was not doing great. And Pilates didn't take off until after Joseph's death, unfortunately. So this guy developed a lot of machine, and the whole thing with Pilates is centered around healing, right? Because that's what he believed. He believed that movement heals. And I would say that Pilates was really ahead of his time because now a lot of the therapy that you do is about healing, moving. Even now, you go to some doctors and they will tell you maybe to do some exercise before you do a surgery to see if exercise can move. So now with our understanding of fitness has changed completely. And then another thing that you guys need to understand. So in the 1930s and 40s, you have billboards. And those billboards say that exercise is bad for you, but smoking is great. So you can look at this old ad, so the 1940s, 1950s, the American cigarette companies would actually hire doctors and to promote smoking because they said smoking reduced stress. So it was always about people smoking everywhere. And then finally, they started to have so many cancer that they had to stop doing that in the 1960s. So I have a lot of admiration for Joseph Pilates and Jack LaLanne because these guys really believed in what they did and they went against the grain. Everyone probably told them, "Are you crazy? You exercise, you're gonna have exercise is so bad for you, right? You got to smoke, you know." And it's interesting how everything has reversed. So there's probably things that Joseph would do differently today had he been born, you know, after or during this fitness revolution, right? So I have a lot of admiration for him because he was able to just stick to his vision, and then unfortunately he had a hard time for this to take off,
Yeah. Yeah, that's so true. It really now it's exploded in popularity in the last
Everyone,
like 2
yes.
decades. So it's been great to see. And I think that's how we came from classical to contemporary, which I would say as somebody who taught Lagree is probably the closest versus classical, but still I like to describe Lagree and tell me if you agree. Lagree and Pilates is like distant cousins. Like there's some similarities
With this, the similarity is rooted into the low impact fitness
and the
really.
springs.
And the spring,
Yeah.
exactly. That's really the key element. And for me, low impact training is very important, especially as you get older.
Yeah.
Let's face it, there's not many people in the 50s who do CrossFit. Okay, so you have the type of activities. I realize that part of getting older is that you have to put a lot of attention to your joint health, right? So this is why now with Lagree, I've evolved the machine to go beyond low impact fitness and now to go toward anti-inflammatory. So I'm studying a lot more the effect of exercise on the joints and the connective tissue. So now I just released the Pro line, the Micro Pro, the Mini Pro, the Mega Pro, all have like these panels that tilts. And when you use this panel that tilts, it puts so much less effort on the joints and it doesn't irritate the connective tissue. So now there's a way to make the workout even more low impact and then start to really reduce or work out with no inflammation, because for me, that would be the key, right?
Yeah.
To be able to get strong and without inflammating the muscle, because that's the problem with bodybuilding. In bodybuilding, you put a lot of inflammation on the joints, and you see it because all these bodybuilders are just constantly taping the elbows. When you tape your entire arm, when you tape your entire knees, when you tape your entire back, and you wear that belt, you're working with so much inflammation. You are intrinsically weak. And this is why a lot of bodybuilders would actually benefit from doing this workout. I would have benefited from this workout 25 years ago, because you're not strength. Your strength is isolated. And so the problem with this, it creates imbalances in the body. And this is why a lot of bodybuilders in the 50s are so much pain. Or a lot of guys who've lifted so much weight in the 20s and 30s, in the 40s, they have the shoulders, they have this pain that doesn't go away in the neck and the shoulders. Sometimes it goes into weird areas of the body because you have so many imbalances, okay? Now, for those guys, Pilates will be great because Pilates helps you to open those big muscles. It helps you to strengthen the little muscles that we never fucking work on because they're not sexy, right? But these muscles are important. Let's put it very simple. If a muscle exists in your body, it has a role. It's important. Don't ignore it, right? But it's a way of working these muscles and integrating these muscles with one another. And that's what I love bodybuilding. It's for me, I look at bodybuilders like fitness scientists, and I love the muscular developments they have, right? So I have a lot of admiration for the time they put in, but I also see a lot of inflammation. And me at 51 now, I'd be like, no way. I wouldn't want to put my body through this, because I want to be able to work out when I'm 61, when I'm 71, when I'm 81, when I'm 91, when I'm 101. I want to fucking go out there, because that's the only thing that energizes me. And I do it also beyond that. And that's what my documentary is about now. It's about mental health, right? It's about the effect of fitness or exercise on the brain and on the mind. So we're talking about mental, psychological, intellectual, emotional, social, and also spiritual health. All right. So there's also spiritual benefits, to working out. And I want to start to incorporate all of these elements into the workout, because what I've realized is all of these years, right, we're all focusing on the superficial benefits of working out, right? And that's the tip of the iceberg. But that iceberg is fitness. Fitness is not just about looking great. It's about feeling, being great. And that's the part of the iceberg you don't see. But a lot of people work out because they need to work out for stress or anxiety or frustration or depression, right? This workout allows them to move themselves forward in life. And that's the direction that I want to focus on. Because very simply, 20 years from now, we're all going to look like Greek god and Greek goddesses. Okay, we're going to go to our local geneticist. We'll have a little, syringe, right? And then you wake up the next day and you've gained 10 pounds of muscle. You've lost all the weight. And the best part about it, you never ever have to work out because you have permanently modified your genetic code. And now you look at the Greek god and Greek goddesses. So what's going to happen to fitness, right? And fitness has to evolve, and fitness has to repurpose itself. And that's why I want to evolve Lagree into more this anti-inflammatory platform, but not just for the body, but also a therapy for the mind and a therapy for the soul. Because I feel like, there's so much shit that's going on in the world right now, and a lot of people they get like anxious. And so fitness allows you to just shift your mood back to neutral, right? And not get so excited with all these crazy things, right? We have AI, potential World War III, and this and that. I mean, it's just like, oh my God, it looks like the whole world is about to explode. And a lot of people out there believe this bullshit. So fitness is a way to just bring yourself back to center, right? Yeah. That's the other element that I want. And then somehow now it's getting back to that kind of mind-body connection that Pilates offer, yoga also offers, and so on.
Yeah. And I think that's also why something that I talk about a lot on my platform is just finding movement that you genuinely enjoy. Yeah. That's why I think you should have an informed perspective before you walk into a workout class, because you want to do something that brings you joy. It's not just about how you look. Because like you said, as time goes on, you're not going to look the same forever, but finding something that genuinely makes you happy while you're moving through it, and hopefully it doesn't have any detrimental impacts on like your joints and things like that.
Absolutely.
So that's why I love Pilates and why I've gravitated to it over the last couple of years.
Yeah, I think I think a lot of people are now becoming aware that it's just that about the joint health and then connective tissues. And I think this is where now there's, a growing demand for this type of workout, and rightfully so,
Describe the differences in the intensity, Pilates versus Lagree.
So there's two types of intensity, right? So I think that there's intensity in the method itself, but also in the teaching style. When you teach Pilates, it's a very cerebral. You're going to spend a lot of time explaining the movement, and then you do this movement, and there's a lot more points, addressed in the movement. And then you take a little break and you move on to the next one. In Lagree, the intensity is not so much in the exercise, it's in the way you teach it, because you have to basically, you don't want any rest, right? In Pilates, you have this break in between the exercises, because again, you're not trying to achieve some kind of a cardiorespiratory fitness, or there's no muscular endurance. It's not about that. But in Lagree, it is, right? Mm-hmm. So in Lagree, the timing of the exercise and the timing in between the exercise is very important. This is where you aim for no transition, right? You're going to do this succession of exercise. So the teaching is very different. Yeah. In Lagree, you'll address less maybe points about the form, but it's about just keeping people in the exercise and really motivating people, inspiring people to stay in this exercise long, and then just correcting the basic form. Pilates is the total opposite way in the way you teach that. Yeah. It's more about this exercise, doing it perfectly, and then you move on to whatever else you do.
Yeah, I completely agree. So when we stop both, that is definitely how it breaks down. You think about transitions being quick and super important in Lagree. You're focused on getting your heart rate up, versus Pilates, you spend a lot more time explaining things. Sometimes you have props. Sometimes you have small little tiny movements that you're trying to do. So I wouldn't say, and I think where a lot of people get confused is a conversation around intensity, is saying that Lagree is intense, meaning that Pilates is easy. No, I'm sure there are some Pilates classes that are easy. Not mine. I try to teach really challenging classes, but intensity is different. So you may feel intensity in the movement that you are doing, but versus Lagree intensity, it's like the overall workout, how you're moving through it. That's Absolutely. Where the intensity really comes into play. Both can be challenging, but in different ways. Lagree, I would say, is more designed around getting that heart rate up and focusing on the fitness aspects of it, versus Pilates is a very precise movement practice. So you may have an instructor who's going to make you move a millimeter each time until you get it right. So it's just, again, a different style and a different preference for a lot of people, depending on the ways that you want to move.
Yeah, and this is why you have this difference in innovation. Like for me, I have a lot of patents on how to transition quickly. I have so many patents on the spring system because every year I try to facilitate the transition. Now I'm working on electronic spring shifting. And so now the instructor can literally control all the machines with one remote control and change the springs for them, because this is how important it is for us that you don't have any time from one exercise to the next. So now we call this new spring system, we call this lightning, because you can literally that's as fast as just touching, a light switch. And so that's important. I have the lights on the machines now because the lights can help you to guide the movement. So what I'm trying to do is I want to facilitate the job of the teacher, so they can actually focus more on form when they talk. Because right now, when the teacher teach, there's so much about the form, the tempo, the duration, all that stuff. So I'm now turning the machine to a computer, so the machine can basically do all of this stuff effortlessly and help basically all the students to get uniform quickly and to get into that exercise as quickly as possible. Because in Lagree, you want to keep your heart rate up. You do all the exercise as slow as possible, and even slower and slower and slower. There's no end to how slow you go.
Yeah.
But that transition has to be super fast. I mean, we actually don't want any transition.
Yeah, I think that's a big difference too, because in Pilates, it's more about as long as you're moving with control. But when I was a Lagree instructor, I was constantly reminding people of like how slow, how many seconds I was counting for them to make sure that they were keeping things really slow, versus that's not something that I do as much in Pilates. Now I'm just more focused on making sure they're moving with control for their body.
Correct.
But it isn't necessarily time under tension.
Correct, yeah.
It is for Lagree.
Yeah, everything that I do for on this machine is all about time under tension. Is how can I keep you in that same exercise for as long as possible? This new spring system that I have is great because you can actually strip the tension as people work out. So they can start with a heavy spring, and after a minute, you can lighten the spring a little bit, so it becomes a little easier. And then another minute after that, you can lighten the spring again, and they never quit this exercise. And then you see them fucking sweating and then shaking. So all the innovations that I design is to do this purpose. It's nothing else, It's like, okay, how can I just make this quick adjustment, or the quickest possible adjustment, and also where the machine is still user friendly.
Yeah.
That was the problem with the first machine that I made. The Proformer, the M1, M2, the M3, the rotating handle was not so user friendly. So over the years, by teaching the classes, I was able to streamline the entire machine, so it becomes more and more and more about the technology in the machine, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And another point is Lagree is time versus Pilates is typically rep-based.
Yes.
Sometimes people will do it time-based, but that's another big difference too.
Yes, because you have the tempo, the muscle contractions. You're going to start a tempo of 4 count, which is essentially an 8-second count on the way out, on the way in. So it's 16 seconds to do just one repetition, which is already pretty slow. But then you want to take that to a tempo of 6 counts, 8 counts, 10, 12, 14, 16. 16, you're moving at literally almost a minute out, a minute in. So it's 40 seconds out, 40 seconds in. So it's a long muscular contraction, right? So it's not about the repetition, definitely about the timing. But again, be able to do this exercise as slow as possible, but keeping your body perfectly aligned, right? So that's the thing when I deviated from bodybuilding, because bodybuilding has its own rule for progressive overloading. And usually there's only 2 ways you slowly add more load to the muscle. You either do more repetition or you add more weight, but it's not really an attention to form. So for me, I constructed Lagree's progressive overloading, and it's a hierarchy. And at the top of that hierarchy, we have form. So we never add more time. We never slow down an exercise at the expense of form. We never increase a range of motion at the expense of form. We never make the exercise more difficult at the expense of form. Form is always there. If you want to start to advance, then you have to keep the form intact, and then you can increase the range of motion, and you can slow down the exercise, you can increase the duration, you can do all these other things, just as long as form is always maintained. Yeah. That's the one thing that also is probably another similarity with Pilates, is really the attention to form, because if you don't have form, you're not targeting the right muscle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So very precise movement practice.
Yes.
Form is paramount.
But Pilates is more precise than Lagree. I would say that.
Yeah.
Pilates is really, that is just like, when I studied Pilates, this was really, just inch by inch, right?
Even millimeter by millimeter.
Yes.
Tiny movements make the big difference.
Right. But in a Lagree class, you can't do this because you lose that detail in the class, right? Yeah. So, and that's usually the drawback of a class versus just one-on-one or small group setting. It's just like, now you have to, so we focus on the bigger, more obvious movements, but we stay away from all these this exercise where you need a lot of explanation. And I think that all the cueing, all the instructions kind of go over people's head unless you're in that industry, and you understand what.
Exactly.
Interesting,
Yeah. Another big difference is Pilates is typically one-on-one, semi-private. That's how it was originally designed. Obviously, as group fitness has evolved, classes have gotten bigger. But typically, like my schedule as an instructor, I teach 80% private. So I'm mostly one-on-one with individuals versus Lagree designed to be for group settings in big rooms.
Yeah.
Teaching for
and the groups are getting bigger too. All the technology I'm adding now to the machine is so that you can teach, 50, 60, 70, 100 people in class, This weekend, we're going to do a micro event. I have 50 micros on the floor. We have a studio in Brentwood where we have 30 megaformers. My goal is to have 50 megaformers. But if I'm going to have that many people in class, then I need the technology in the machine so that the technology helps me to keep the workout safe, effective, and efficient, because I will never increase the class capacity. I will never change the method or modify the machine or add an exercise if it's not safe, effective, and efficient, because this is a moving target for lawyers. Okay. This is like that carriage is lawyers' heaven. How many people fall off because of that carriage back and forth? And that's why the instructions have to be impeccable. That's why the design of the machine has to be perfect so that we don't have people falling off. For 3 years, we had this one machine, the Supra, we had this machine lifting up, tilting up, or incline and tilt, right? We never had one person falling off that machine. Yeah. And these classes were 25 minutes long. So every 30 minutes, we had 20 new people coming in. Yeah. It was like a factory. And you know what? Not one person fell off. And these machines were lifting and tilted. That was an ass kicker.
Yeah, I always tell people when getting started out with Pilates, it's always best to start with privates. It's important to have that one-on-one attention to give you that foundational work to help you understand. You're going to hear some terminology in that first session that will set you up for success for your next session. And keep an open mind. Your body's going to move in new and different ways. You maybe, if you're not somebody who's super flexible, there will be some mobility aspects to work on. But I always say keep an open mind. Try to go for one-on-one first to really help set you up for success. And communicate with your instructor, because you are in that one-on-one setting, so you have an opportunity to really tailor that program.
In a Lagree class, what you need to do is you need to give your body time to settle into the movement. I think we did a video recently about, sometimes instructors trying to overhelp, students. And at the end of the day, you're going to do a fitness exercise on a moving carriage. So it's not as unstable as a Bosu ball, for example, or a big ball, but it's still pretty unstable. And if you're not used to this type of movements, it's going to take a couple days, for your body to feel like, oh, I'm not on the floor anymore. It's kind of, the floor is moving away from me. And so it takes time for people to be able to stay in the right body alignment and move slowly and just kind of download the method. So I'd say for your Lagree class, very simple. If you've never worked out a day in your life, you might want to benefit from a one-on-one. Okay, so same thing as Pilates for that. Okay, because you're going to move into a class and you don't want to try to keep up with the pace, and then you basically end up injure yourself. And otherwise, you just want to do the exercise, and you don't be afraid of stopping during the exercise and just go at your own pace. Okay, the problem with the class versus a one-on-one is it's a class. So it's like you're taking a train. You have to just hop on the train when everybody leaves, and you get off when everyone leaves. You can't just do whatever you want. You have to follow the class. So it works when your body is trained for it. But when it's a brand new method, it's going to take you some time. And some people do very well the first time. We've had newbies working just like that. They get into positions and they do it great. But most of the people need about 2, 3, 4 sessions to get used to this new way of moving, because what Lagree is that essentially is a circuit training with a spring-based system, but also with an element of instability. The fact that the carriage moves back and forth is really important because it allows your body to contract both the bigger and the smaller muscles. So you're not going to be as extrinsically strong as you would be on the floor. So let's say if you do like a shoulder press with 50 pounds sitting on a chair, you probably can do only 25 pounds or 20 pounds, the equivalent of 25 pounds or 20 pounds on the mega, because now you have to stabilize yourself, and you didn't have to do this before. So sometimes people get upset because, well, I lift a lot of weights and I can't do this workout. Well, that's because you are intrinsically weak. And that's when this workout, or Pilates actually is beneficial, because you work on the smaller intrinsic muscles that allow the bigger muscles to function. So I tell all my athlete friends, all the guys that come in all the time, it's like, listen, this is a workout that you do. You might not see direct benefit from it, but the indirect benefit will be like you're going to bench press more, you're going to run harder, faster, more stamina. If you love spinning, you'll be able to spin harder. It's going to give you this muscular endurance. So you will see the benefit in the other application, the other sports that you're doing. Okay. So it's not always going to be, you're going to see like, incredible muscular definition from this workout if you're doing other workout. But this is a great way to integrate everything, because I feel like fitness is very fragmented right now. So people stretch and they call it fitness. People run, they call it fitness. People do Pilates, they call it fitness. Whereas if fitness is not an activity, it's an ensemble fitness is really lifestyle, and it's an ensemble of elements. It's not just the physical. There's also the mind and the spirituality, right? For me now, I've learned that the fitness is a triangle essentially, right? You have mind, body, spirit, and these three together are acting on each other. And that's what I want to integrate, into the future of Lagree, because it's not just about the muscles and the physical body, but your mind and your spirit, very important elements as well,
I have a question for you, actually. Would you say that Lagree is best for people with a solid fitness foundation to start versus someone who's never exercised a day in their life? Because I think Pilates is definitely something I've seen the whole spectrum, a range of people who have never exercised, people who are just coming back to fitness. But as a Lagree instructor, I remember most people were active in other ways and they were just looking to level up their fitness or do something different. Would you agree that's kind of how you think about it?
Absolutely. Yeah. It's people who benefit from Lagree will already have like a legging into or footing into the fitness world. And this is a way to kind of just do something different and very intense. I mean, for me, when I work out, I love it. When I would do something fitness, I love it to be intense. But at the same time, I know that I also need to stretch and do these other movements, right? And that's why I always stretch people. Like, I try to explain to people about fitness. It's balance. So that's why I say Pilates and Lagree work well together, yin and yang, because you can't just always do workout that push your heart rate up and you sweat and you shake. Your body also needs the opposite, right? So it's very important that rest and recovery time is really important for the development of the not just the muscles, but the connective tissues, the tendons, the ligaments. The connective tissues also need time for rest, What I realized with weightlifting, for example, is when I started to work with people, that were, when I was studying Pilates, that a lot of the people look great on the outside, but on the inside, they were completely broken. And that was from the overuse of exercise, right? These people lifted too much weight too often, not enough rest, bad form. And after 20 years of doing that, the shoulders were basically gone. All the connective tissues, some of the connective tissues had fused with the bones because they never work on the mobility, right? So we all want this, like, or guys like to have this muscular body and fat-free. But you also need to be mobile, and you need to work on your balance, and you need to be flexible. You need to work for more than just one plane of motion, right? So many guys only one plane of motion all the time. So they get very, very, very strong doing this one exercise, but God forbid that they deviate, boop, the shoulder goes out. They can't even handle that weight. And so true fitness is being strong all the way around as well, right? This is not just this one motion. So I'm trying to educate people about what it means to be fit, but also that fitness cannot just be intense all the time, And that's when I like the combination of the Pilates and Lagree, or yoga and Lagree, or yoga and Pilates. All of these work really well together,
All about finding balance.
Find a balance, exactly. Yeah, absolutely. Well, Morgan, thank you so much for coming to the Lagree HQ and chatting about Pilates versus Lagree. I really, first of all, thank you for all the support, and also thank you for keeping it real and really explaining people the difference without putting anyone down, because we're not putting anyone down here except for the fucking copycats. Okay. All right. Sorry, I have to say that. Guys, if you like this type of videos and you want to do more videos, I'm always happy to talk more, Lagree and Pilates. I think those are, of course, two wonderful methods. And I think I really want to spend the time to educate everyone. So when people walk into a studio, they know what they're getting, right? Exactly. Because it's all about the education. Because this is a lot of it is, it's not so obvious, right? There's you have to kind of feel this method. It's not as obvious as cardio weightlifting. It's way more sophisticated. These two methods are way more sophisticated than just going for a walk and lifting weight. And that's why the education is important. And as I've learned, that you can't just say one thing once, you have to keep repeating yourself. And after 20 years, people's like, Oh yeah, that's what you meant. Like, yeah.
Well, great. Thank you so much for
Morgan,
having me. This
thank
was
you
so
so
much
much.
fun.
Thank you so
Yeah.
much. Bye,
More to
guys.
come.